being women in the military, and then after that, like, what is our example to be after we're done with service? Where is our representation in mainstream? Moving on from talking about underwear to discussing some of our intersectionalities that are still so similar, but that really do touch on hot topics now. Things like we're both queer, we're both bisexual or pansexual women. Mm-hmm. We are both half European descent. My father is like British and Irish, and my mother is Indigenous, Filipino, Polynesian, and Black. And what is it that you are?
My mother is Irish and English, and my paternal birth father was Black. There's a little bit of Spanish and Indigenous as well. There's a lot of challenges for us in both navigating being lighter-skinned Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC, and all the privileges that brings, but then a lot of the racism and colorism and being whitewashed. And like we've talked a lot about our struggles and how do we make sure we're holding appropriate space for our dark and melanated brothers and sisters of color? Where do we fit in the conversation? Whose table do we sit at? Where do we belong? Where do we speak?
We're too dark on the white side. It can be uncomfortable over there. Mm-hmm. But then on the other side, I don't want to take away from anything that, experience that our Black and brothers and sisters mm-hmm. are experiencing. And I don't want to invade their spaces that are for them.
Right.
Understanding, where my privileges lie in all of this, things I do to perpetuate these issues, not speaking up, being silent. In the last few months, we've been seeing people just stand up and speak out, and it's been refreshing. I think we both have such big voices, and we have a way to write and connect with others in the works that we do. And that's, ultimately what's ended us up here. In the future, we're going to want to bring on other veterans to share their experiences, other people of color, people in other marginalized communities, but that are also, veterans like us, maybe even some more civilians, finding out where we fit and how we can help further the cause from our spaces. We're also both mothers. Mm-hmm. So, and we're mothers with PTSD.
Which is and a whole thing in and of itself, especially with like wartime PTSD. Yeah, definitely. I had traumas and all sorts of things. I've had military sexual trauma. You'll hear us refer to that in the podcast. The acronym for that is MST. So military sexual trauma, MST. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure there's other things. I'm trying to be better about defining the acronyms.
I know, you're doing really good.
Thank you. If you know anything about military, you know that we have lots of acronyms. So before my deployments, I had experienced MST, and then just the stress of military life. We'll explore that another podcast on the road. But when I deployed, it took me about 6 months after I came home from that the initial year-long deployment that I volunteered for in Baghdad, mm-hmm. for me to experience my first full-blown panic attack. And I didn't know exactly what was happening with that. Blacked me out, and I came to in the emergency room with a sergeant who had driven me there. I barely remembered the drive there. I just knew that I blacked out, and they tested me for like cocaine because my heart rate was through the roof. And then that just kind of was this cascading thing that lasted forever. I used to be curled up in a ball under my desk in my home on weekends and nights, crying, just like overwhelming, crippling anxiety and panic attacks washing through. And at the time too, the way that they would, categorize PTSD, they'd be like, well, are you having flashbacks? Do you think you're in Iraq when you're in your briefing room? And I'm like, no. Like, well, then you don't have PTSD.
I know I'm not in Iraq.
Obviously, I know I'm not in Iraq.
Like the way they made the qualifying symptoms for varying degrees. I thought, mm-hmm. I have like a little bit of PTSD, like a little bit, a little tiny bit. Right. But they try to convince you that you're just fine. Yes.
And then if you have anything in your career riding on you not having marks against you, then you also convince yourself that you're just fine.
Yep.
So, that immobility, and then, factor in like insomnia on top of that. And then I shifted into pretty intense alcoholism. I prided myself on being able to drink any of my male counterparts under the table. Like that was a great thing that I could do. For me, like I worked where I couldn't share any of my experiences really at that time. So it was like, you weren't in combat, so you can't possibly have PTSD. And that's not true. Like you and I have talked about this, how we're both combat veterans, but is taken away from us a lot of times in conversation, usually with other veterans who are combat veterans as well, who had like typical what you would expect. What do you see watching like What's that movie where he's sniper? American Sniper. If you didn't do that, you're not a real combat veteran. Not true.
Absolutely. Yeah, being women in the military, and then after that, like, what is our example to be after we're done with service? Where is our representation in mainstream anywhere? Unfortunately, the majority, even though we have women all over the military and in interesting places and in movies and shit, but we don't have an example of what a crazy old veteran looks like. And I'm just going to use that as just like a general term, like jokingly and lovingly, because I
know lots of crazy old white men veterans.
Right. And it's just men. And a lot of times it's people fucking screaming MAGA. And I, for so long, was just so frustrated. They were like taking over the veteran status.
Right.
There are women. There are queer women. There are queer BIPOC women veterans. That's where we fit. That's our space.
And then those who have shifted also into becoming healers and helpers afterwards, which is where we are.
Absolutely. People listening right now can't see, but I have my flags with me everywhere. At one point, I talked to some young kids about how the way they felt about the flag. And it really hurt my feelings because they were like, yeah, when I see that, like, I'm not extremely full of pride. And in my head, I'm like, what is wrong with you? How could you not? Then I realized we're not giving these kids something to be proud of. So someone like my little sister, we've been at war for almost her entire existence. She does not know a life without America being at the same war, the same one. Fucking, 20 years later, here we are. It just makes me want to go out and change what the face of what that flag represents. Like, I want those kids coming up to find pride again when they look at this. And I feel like people like us can help lead that way.
That's something that's been very important to me as well. Having the conversation with people in my life who are ethnically just white, feeling uncomfortable in their bodies and feeling like because they're in white bodies, they represent all of the harm that's ever happened to BIPOC, and how they're like, how do I navigate the world without carrying this symbol of being a giant colonizing asshole around with me and I can't get it off? And I'm like, well, number one, welcome to experiences of like your skin color defining everything. Number two, like, your feelings are really valid. Number three, I had provided my perspective from what it was like for me in the military, especially when I deployed and the work I did. Even within counterterrorism, I was still focusing on human rights violations and things like that. And how did these situations get so fucked up? And like, what do we do? What can we do better? How can we actually be helpful instead of just being hindrances? And then as a civilian working at the college as the veteran student liaison at the Veteran Center, I would bring in refugee students. I want to continue to like help, but how can we change our connection? And a lot of the conversation we had, they'd be like, why the fuck do I want to talk to like a veteran whose uniform and title or status represents all of this harm that's happened? You're right. I'm here because I want to be a counterbalance. Like, I want to do things differently. I want to acknowledge that and then use my power within that position, within this visible thing, to make sure that I am supporting you and advocating for you and pulling in resources and then helping elevate your voice with my voice. That's something we both do. We're huge advocates. And I think that's really powerful and important.
That veteran status, that one there gives us a special bit of privilege. What veterans do, and I'm not just trying to like up talk us, we selflessly give ourselves up for this nation, period. However long we serve, however that service goes, you signed on the dotted line. You made a blank check for up to your entire fucking life. And when we come home, we do get to carry that badge of veteran. And how can we use that to counterbalance the negative shit that I hear? I hear so many veterans that can't even fucking handle BLM, Black Lives Matter. And that breaks my fucking heart. But then I know that unfortunately fear and negativity can be a lot louder than positivity and peace.
Right.
So we have to amplify the positivity and peace that we can using the skill sets that the government gave us.
Right. Skill sets, vetting information, making sure we can recognize misinformation, learning to cross-check and double check our references and our sources, learning to witness patterns, also having like an internalized that PTSD has some hopeful components to it. We have an internalized warning system. We talked about attending protests. You were able to see when shit was about to turn south with the police because you have that warning system of like, oh, they're not like dropping down to one knee out of solidarity. They're about to put their gas masks on because that's how we're trained. We might have differing perspectives on this. I don't think that we do, but we might. So please share freely however you think about this. Something that I saw recently was a video, police responding to an officer who was they needed help or something. And all of these protesters like swarmed his car. Have you seen this video? And they were like banging on it and yelling and like smashing things. And so he started just like driving, right? And was like knocking people over. And a lot of protesters were freaking out and like, those fucking pigs are like running everybody over, motherfuckers. And I watched the video and I was like, get out of the way. What are you doing? This is the middle
what would you do if someone was bashing in your fucking window?
Right.
I hit a car when I was in Iraq when they had reparked one of their cars on the street so that I just could barely get by. So what would I do if I felt like I was piled on by a bunch of people?
So, you know, one of the topics that we'll get into more is talking about police brutality and state-sanctioned violence and that kind of thing, specifically around what we've seen within the recent protests, how especially for me personally, here in the Seattle area, watching all of that and some of the, you know, alarm that I felt in witnessing that. If I was watching this happen somewhere else in a different country, I'd be very fucking worried.
Can you just tell me, just from your perspective, being not too far away from it, was CHOP all it was cracked up to be on the media?
I actually am not going to speak on that definitively because I have two guests that I want to bring on who live
perfect.
in the corner. Yeah. So Megan is one of them. Megan is a mental health provider and also has hidden disabilities and things like that. So we're going to have conversation with her because she lives just a couple blocks away from CHOP. She's an ally as well.
Oh, I'm excited to bring her in.
Yeah, because I live the area in the greater Seattle area that I live in. It would take me probably 20 minutes to get to CHOP. So I have my perspectives, but they're very much like a bystander of a bystander. Oh, and that's also military skill set. If I am not a subject matter expert on something, I'm cautious to provide my opinion about things until I've really dug deep and done my research. And so
absolutely
talk about on this podcast, if we're not, let's say, armed to the teeth with knowledge, that's terrible.
Armed to the teeth
with knowledge. If we aren't well versed on something, we're not going to pretend like we are. So that's important. One of my perspectives within that, because my background is in criminology and counterterrorism, working hand in hand with law enforcement and the military, when I talked about doing interagency or joint task force work, some of that was working with both military police and civilian police and different investigation agencies. So I had a very intimate knowledge and background of applied experience working within those. And so I call bullshit very quickly. And then this is where some people, I'm not talking about Black voices, in particular, white leftist activists. Sometimes there's this really positive thing that they're going towards, and sometimes they're just capitalizing on chaos. And I think that there are times when I've seen them really demonize law enforcement in ways that I'm like, that's not right. And why are you trying to completely get rid of? I am very much for continuing to educate myself on defunding. I'm learning more about that. But abolishing the police, unfortunately, for everybody who wants to just get along, not everybody wants to just get along with you. Law enforcement is something that has to be
a necessity.
It's a necessity. There are different ways for it to exist, which hence the defunding component. But I know from personal fucking experience exactly what happens when you create what's called a security vacuum. That is not something that we want to have happen. We'll explore this more later if you want to contribute anything to this.
These are the kind of topics that we're going to be touching on. We want to thoroughly delve into each of these and add more and more and more and give our opinions, logic, and education. And then going into the healing component. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are as a healer?
Yeah, absolutely. Traditionally initiated as a medicine woman in the Cajas of the Andes Mountains in Ecuador. I am really honored and grateful to be gifted with offering and practicing very sacred healing on Duwamish land as somebody who is a BIPOC healer, a medicine woman who is not of Duwamish heritage. I am a Reiki master teacher, an intuitive healer, and holistic health and wellness practitioner. So some of my very early background, like in 2012, being a mom with PTSD, I started studying Buddhism, different types of healing arts, and nutrition, also learning different types of holistic health and wellness. I started the community healing program way back then. That is what my practice has been built on. Started sitting down with clients as, what was I calling myself? As an intelligence analyst. I had done all of this research on health and wellness and nutrition, but I'm not a licensed nutritionist. So I was a nutrition and health analyst, researcher, consultant or something. I didn't charge anybody anything. You are presenting all of these things. This is all of the research I did. The prescription for nutritional healing, which I have read like almost all of this book. And then I have, 20 of these different resources, cross-referencing and cross-checking things. And I would go down and look at all of their symptoms or whatever it is they were working through, highlight things. And then I would give my recommendations for continued research with like this much stuff here. Empower yourself. These are the things I've learned. This may or may not be helpful. Make sure you check with your doctor. If you have a nutritionist, check it with your nutritionist. And this is how I still work now. I do talk therapy in sessions, and a big bulk of my clients are licensed mental health counselors. And so we talk about this, where I'm like, I have all my disclaimers. I'm not a licensed mental health counselor. However, my background is in applied psychology. As a wounded healer, I've gone through 15 years of cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that, which means then also as an analyst, but I go back into my space and I'm like, cognitive behavioral therapy and like research it. And then I have all these textbooks learning about how to do that. In my practice, I teach the intersection between traditional Indigenous healing, science-based modern medicine and types of therapy, and woo. So like, I can do a tarot reading for you and connect with your past lives. And then I can also teach you the science of Reiki and how that works. And then we can talk about nutrition and the way your body metabolizes wheat. So when I know, from our conversations that you are similar in this way, I'm a very skeptical healer, very much about your gut check. Don't get taken for a ride. So that was my very long answer to your question. Lauren, you and I have done session work together. What's really lovely is that at this point now, we share our medicine with each other for nourishing each other. It's been so wonderful to have you as a peer guiding me in that space. And so if you want to talk about that and then some of the other work.
Yeah, I counsel people on plant therapies and microdosing with different entheogenic, naturally occurring plant therapies. And the ones like I'll touch on, cannabis and mushrooms. I think that they are going to be changing the way we're approaching mental health and medicine overall. And I'm really big on microdosing. So what I do is I just counsel, I just tell people, I give people information on how to safely partake in either trip settings or doing something like microdosing and taking tea, which is less, you have way less of an effect than drinking a cup of coffee when you're actually microdosing with plant medicines. They're there to not mask your symptoms. They're there to give your body a little bit of relief, and they kind of help relax you. I just like educating people on it. I have countless links to resources, and there's so many different stories out there of other people sharing their own experiences. And I just try to compile that and share it up as often as I can and counsel and walk people through, their own experiences. I'm so big on plant medications because the one thing that we do know for sure is that in states that have legalized cannabis, we are seeing opioid addiction rates drop. Mm-hmm. And that's a big fucking deal. Like if we really care about the opioid addiction, we would probably legalize the one thing that's actually affecting it currently at this moment. Aside from like prison and addiction reform and right. Police reform. With mushrooms that I always like to talk to people about. Johns Hopkins Research Facility is doing all the research on this stuff right now.
Such good research.
It is. And they're showing the healing capabilities of plant therapies, that prescription medications that are toxic and are killing people, right. including our veterans. Some, mental health and nerve medications have risks of suicidal ideation. These plant medicines don't have that. Specifically, mushrooms are anti-addictives.
Especially when you're microdosing, right?
Oh my God, yes. Microdosing, and I'm not meaning like taking 100 to 500 milligrams for like a light microdose. I mean like 20 milligrams. a day or every other day or, 3 times a week. Just, it helps boost up your serotonin. It kind of shuts off for me when I've done it in the past. It shuts off that anxiety and depressive feeling. I mean, I do a lot of different things for PTSD, but plant therapies are such a good, safe, healthy option that we should all have. They're not going to hurt us like the other stuff can. This stuff can't hurt us. Medications can. And Reiki, acupuncture, counseling, stellate ganglion block. We need toolkits that we're pulling from. Everybody has different ones. So I try and counsel people on that. I'm going off on a tangent right now. I'm sorry.
No, it's so good. Don't apologize. And we'll have entire episodes that are dedicated to more of these more in detail.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we have different types of healing that we practice or counsel on, or just talk to or share the information on, because unfortunately, laws don't allow us to do these things right now, but the information's out there and we've had the experiences. The healing stuff we do works. Just trying to give back and trying to put that back here in a podcast. Like, how can we at least use the conversations that we have so many times on these topics?
We already are pretty well versed in them. And so it's kind of like we're like regurgitating back and forth healing, which sounds disgusting.
I'm in school on a psychology with concentration and addiction path right now.
Which is what I've been studying too.
Yes, copycat. We're twinsies. Me going to school isn't going to do anything about the way I speak to people.
Right.
I've gone to therapy for a long time. I've been there, done that. I generally turn around and end up talking to my therapist about themselves.
Oh, same.
You don't comprehend what's going on within me, in my body, and in my brain. Right. And you're not ever going to understand that because you've never been there. But I have. So I have the ability to speak to people like me. Yes, you may have just spent, a decade of your life going to school. I spent a decade of my life with these people, taking care of them.
Absolutely.
We did the shit. We've done the years. The little extra bit is just so I can get some damn initials by myself.
So I can, start letting people use their insurance.
Yes. Or that, the VA can take me serious. My dream, especially with what's going on right now, I feel like I'm going to be just in time, getting done, ready so I can become a trip sitting counselor. I want to do trip sitting therapy for patients. I want to use psychedelics to help people with PTSD.
And they're starting to crack the lid open on that a little bit.
They are.
By the time you're done.
I'm going to be ready. And I'll have already had the fucking life experience that some little kid, fresh kid coming out of college that never fucking went anywhere.
Right. It's not to say that that's not a lot of really hard work and that the education isn't important. I've been in school continuously since 2005. That education is so important, but that lived experience, this is why with some jobs, they're like, you need a master's degree or an equivalent amount of experience. That applied experience is completely invaluable.
We can talk to people that have been through traumatic experiences because we have been there. We have been through some of the most traumatic experience that the world has to offer. We didn't just experience them for a little bit. We experienced them for a long period of time. So we were changed and conditioned for the rest of our lives. And thankfully, lots of people will never have to go through that. I'm thankful. That's why I put my uniform on. But when we come back, I wholeheartedly believe that we need to be taking care of our own.
I agree.
The VA does a lot to help, but I think they've got a lot of shit wrong. It's not a comfortable place for everybody.
Right.
And it needs to be. We need to be doing better when we need to be offering more access to alternative PTSD treatments and accepting some woo-woo shit that, you maybe can't fucking pin it on, a scientific diagram.
They're starting to take that more seriously. I have looked at scans. I would love nothing more to be able to do the different types of work I do and be hooked up to all of the things. There was a male vet that I worked with, a combat veteran, who the first time I got him on the table, he was like, I don't know about this. I think this is going to be stupid. I'm not going to feel anything. And I was like, that's fine. After the session, he was like, why does the middle of my forehead hurt? What is this right here? And I said, do you really want me to tell you? And he was like, yeah, it just doesn't hurt, but it's all weird and tingly and shit. And I said, that's your third eye. And he was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I said, you fucking asked me. And he was like, why did it feel like you were touching my feet and my head at the same time? Like you left one area and you went to touch someplace else, and then all of a sudden you were touching my arm, but I could still feel you my feet. With I know, I'm glad that I'm not living then. His feedback afterward, he was like, I'm mad. And I said, why are you mad? He was, because I feel so fucking relaxed. I'm angry with how calm I feel and how noticeable of a difference this is. How the whole time you're working, I just felt like he was like, I don't want to say. And he's like, like 6'6" and this like burly Marine. I don't want to say that I felt like I was floating on the table, but I did. There's nothing you could say about Reiki and healing medicine and how fucking dumb you think it sounds that I didn't say until I experienced it, and then was like, why do I feel well right now?
So I think that this has been a really great first episode. We're just really trying to introduce ourselves to you listeners out there. In the future, we'll have more concentration on specific hot topics. And like we said, we'll be bringing in other people to interview and join the conversation. We're just really thankful that anybody out there wants to listen to us. We're happy to bring to you whatever we share with each other throughout the week. And we just hope that it can be a little blessing in your guys' lives out there. So thank you for joining me on this, Siobhan. I mean, this journey has been so fun together.
Thank you for joining me, Lauren. It's been great.
This girl works her butt off. You should see the ridiculous amounts of notes that she has written that we aren't looking at today.
We just mostly talked about underwear. It's fun.
Yes.
Yes. This show will have been produced and edited by Siobhan Barrett, me.
Yeah.
And I do want to say at the end, thank you. At the end of our episodes, we want to integrate encouragement with all the crazy things that are going on in the world. Finding a balance between maintaining awareness and knowledge, and then making sure you're nourishing yourself. So make sure you intentionally slow down and take some very mindful breaths. You're allowed to be grounded and balanced and centered. No matter what you have going on, if you're able to stop for just a minute and connect in with yourself and just remind yourself every second that you have here is so important. It's like veterans with PTSD and trauma, I won't speak for you, but I know there have been times where I've been on suicide watch in the military, and like there have been times when I didn't want to be here, and I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here with you.
Absolutely. I'm thankful you're here too. And one of the first things, especially speaking on PTSD and closing out with this, turning this into such a heavier end. When you do suffer with mental health and anxiety disorders, one of the first things that start going is the attention that you put on yourself and the care that you give yourself. And so I know saying self-care all the time seems like so silly and overused, but we're really, really overworked. We are all tired, and we all deserve some more time off. I mean, COVID's kind of forced it upon us. In one way, it's horrible. COVID's terrible. But then on the other hand, I think it's really made people slow down and force people to focus on themselves and the people that are around them that care about them the most. But even in that, we still don't remember to take care of ourselves all the time. Mm-hmm. For me, the first thing that goes is t-shirts and sweatpants all the time. Simple things like putting lotion on and taking vitamins. But taking your multivitamin is self-care. Supplementing some extra magnesium and valerian root to get better sleep and to deal with headaches is really awesome. And again, some more self-care. Getting a scheduled appointment with a local Reiki practitioner.
It doesn't even have to be near you, by the way. We can do this stuff distance.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will advertise, like, I'll just do a free listening session. You can just talk and I'll listen. That can be really helpful too, especially if you're a parent in this pandemic, or if you are in any kind of dangerous living situation or anything like that too. You still deserve to be able to take care of yourself. I want to really quickly drop the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We lose, 20 veterans a day to suicide.
Yeah, 22 on up, getting 25.
So that number is 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255. And if you're listening to the podcast and you need support, whether it's support that we can provide or we have resources for you, the website is sacredupheaval.com. Contact us. Hey, I need help with this resource, and we'll connect to you. Lauren runs Hippie and a Veteran on Facebook, and she is constantly giving fantastic resources there and some serious shit and some funny memes and all the things to like uplift your spirits. We're really happy to be supportive in your self-care too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for listening to us jabber away.
Thanks for joining us. So we'll see you again.
We get to see you next week.
Next week.
Bye.